Doug was never the type to open up easily, and in the past, he often avoided deep conversations, especially those involving emotions. But this time, something in Ted's eyes stopped Doug from turning away. The man in front of him was no longer the confident, imposing Ted he once knew. Ted was unraveling, layer by layer, exposing a broken man deeply wounded by his divorce from Nicole, the woman he once believed would be by his side forever. Doug saw that, and instead of staying silent as he usually did, he chose to stay, sit down, and offer advice even if it was advice he himself had never quite managed to follow. It wasn't rehearsed or preachy. It was raw, shaped by failure, experience, and regret, the kind of truth only someone who had made his own share of mistakes could deliver sincerely. Doug's particular concern for Ted and Nicole wasn't just about shared experiences between broken men. There was something deeper, more smoldering in Doug's eyes whenever their relationship was brought up. Some believed Doug had once been a close friend to both of them, present during the early, dream-filled days of their romance, maybe even there for that first dinner when Nicole introduced Ted as the man she trusted completely. Others speculated that Doug had always admired the kind of love they shared, a love he never truly had. Years of solitude, fleeting romances, and bitter failures had given Doug a unique perspective on lasting relationships. Deep down, perhaps he always longed for a different version of his life, one where he had a home like Ted once did. But that didn't mean Doug was envious. On the contrary, he might have felt a responsibility to preserve something for a friend teetering between loss and redemption. If he didn't act, he might feel complicit in the cruelty of the unraveling. Yet no one could be entirely sure about Doug. Those closest to him knew that beneath his calm exterior was a chaotic past filled with choices that had cost others dearly. He once stayed silent when a colleague was wrongly accused in an internal investigation. He'd chosen not to stand up for the truth for fear of losing his job. He had hurt a woman who truly loved him simply because he couldn't confront his own emotions. Those things didn't make him evil, but they cast a shadow of doubt. Was he really being sincere with Ted this time, or was he hiding a secret that could make everything worse? A theory began to circulate after someone from Doug's former media company claimed he possessed compromising information about Nicole, material that, if revealed, would destroy her public image and community credibility. No one knew how Doug had obtained it, or what he planned to do with it. But the rumor sparked questions. Was Doug playing the role of a confidant to gain access and gather more intel? Was he exploiting Ted's vulnerability for a deeper agenda, personal revenge, or something orchestrated by a higher power? Some even speculated that Doug had once had a secret romantic relationship with Nicole, a buried past that never truly faded. And if that were true, then his presence now could be part of a calculated emotional manipulation, pushing Ted to the edge in order to take advantage of his collapse. Still, it was also possible that Doug was genuinely trying to change. After years of walking the line between right and wrong, truth and deception, maybe he was stepping into a new phase, one where forgiveness, honesty, and helping others was his only shot at redemption. Perhaps Doug knew his chances to be better were running out, and helping Ted now was his final test. By standing with Ted amid the wreckage, Doug could be making a quiet apology to all those he once abandoned. And while skepticism remained, those who still believed in human nature hoped Doug was not just a background character in his friend's crisis, but a man silently fighting to preserve something beautiful in a world falling apart from hatred, division, and loss. The truth about Doug would eventually come to light, and when it did, everything he'd said to Ted would be re-examined either as essential lifelines during a crisis, or as poisoned daggers sheathed in charm, waiting to strike. But regardless of the outcome, Doug had become an indispensable part of Ted and Nicole's journey through destruction and perhaps rebirth. A man straddling light and shadow, imperfect, enigmatic, but impossible to ignore. Doug was not someone who shared secrets lightly, and certainly not the type to reveal information unless there was a greater purpose. So when he approached Jacob, face more tense than usual, voice low, and waited like pulling someone back from a ledge, no one could dismiss what he was about to reveal. Jacob, typically calm and composed, felt a heaviness in the air. Not because he hadn't heard the rumors about Joey, but because he never imagined Doug would be the one holding the key to a truth capable of shattering the foundation he once trusted. Doug hadn't come to this moment spontaneously. He had been watching, waiting, silently connecting the dots until he had enough evidence that went beyond suspicion, evidence so clear, it couldn't be denied. What Doug shared wasn't just about Joey, it was a fragment of the hidden web Joey had been weaving for years under the guise of a respectable political figure and loyal Dupree family advisor. Doug disclosed that during his time in media and later as a junior policy advisor, he had accidentally come across encrypted communications between Joey and a powerful state cabinet member. A man allegedly sponsoring shady budget packages whose funds never reached the advertised community programs, but instead circled back to private funds Joey controlled. Doug didn't just talk, he produced transaction records, decoded email chains, and a leaked call recording in which Joey mentioned shielding Vernon from investigative eyes if everything fell apart. Each piece of evidence was a blade, slicing through the trust Jacob had once placed in Joey, a man he had seen as a political mentor, a trusted ally in crafting his public image. What made it worse was a revelation Doug shared only with Jacob. If this came to light, both Vernon and Anita could be swept into an unprecedented crisis. Doug claimed that among the leaked documents was proof that Joey had manipulated the Dupree-named charities long hailed as local humanitarian cornerstones to launder money for a shadowy financial network tied to real estate speculation and abandoned projects. These projects, drained of public funding, were then purchased by shell companies, one of which was registered under a former assistant of Anita's. If true, this wasn't just about Joey. The entire Dupree legacy, with its power, prestige, and public trust, could be obliterated in the storm. Jacob, a man who believed politics should be built on trust and integrity, felt as if the ground beneath him was cracking. He had thought Joey was shrewd, perhaps manipulative, but not someone orchestrating an underground empire masked in noble speeches. Now, the naked truth stood before him. All he once fought for, all he once honored, might have been pawns in someone else's power game. If Doug was right, if the documents were real, then Jacob wasn't just holding the means to destroy Joey. He was holding the spark that could ignite a political coup within the most powerful family in the city. But the pressing question remained, why was Doug doing this? For justice? For Ted? Or for something more personal? Some believed Doug had once been cast aside from a major media project after questioning shady grants. Others thought he had loved a woman who became collateral damage in Joey's financial web. Whatever the reason, Doug had chosen this moment carefully. When Ted was lost, Nicole discredited, the Duprees in internal chaos, and Jacob, Joey's potential political rival, was looking for a reason to challenge the old order. Doug may not be a hero, but he was playing the role of the catalyst, a figure who forced others to act, whether for conscience or ambition. For Jacob, the choice was no longer whether he believed Doug. It was whether he was willing to use the truth to burn down the lies he had unknowingly become part of. Because once a secret is revealed, there's no way to repackage it. And the political earthquake shaking the Dupree empire might just be beginning. Jacob had never imagined that his career, built on conviction, ethics, and the drive to bring change, would face its fiercest trial inside the very home he once called a second family. From the day he married Naomi, he had tried to balance two worlds, his love for the strong, proud Dupree daughter and his vow never to become a pawn of power. But Doug's revelations had warped the entire picture beyond concealment. Joey, once Vernon's trusted advisor, the architect of the Dupree family's image, was now implicated in financial manipulation, money laundering, and exploitation of community funds. Doug's evidence didn't just target Joey, it hinted at dark links to Vernon and Anita. If exposed, the entire Dupree family, Naomi's flesh and blood, could fall, and Jacob, once an outsider now tied by marriage, would be left standing at the center of a moral abyss. For days after learning the truth, Jacob barely slept. He lay next to Naomi each night, listening to her calm breathing, trying not to let her sense the storm churning inside. He looked at the woman he loved, the woman who once said the most important thing in life was honesty and loyalty to enduring values. But now, if Jacob spoke, he risked destroying not just the Dupree legacy but the very world his wife held dear. And worst of all, he didn't know if Naomi was innocent. She might be just an heir, unaware of her parents' secrets. But she might also know, and have chosen silence, like his father once did, like so many in power do, to preserve image, avoid scandal, and protect family. Jacob had once sworn he would never be like his father, a government man who turned a blind eye to injustice. He'd hated his father's compromises, wondering how a man could live a lifetime in quiet complicity. But now, facing a similar crossroads, Jacob began to understand. Because sometimes the truth wasn't a question of right or wrong. It was a bomb detonating indiscriminately, obliterating both guilt and innocence, severing every bond in its path. Jacob knew that revealing Doug's information, siding with justice, meant confronting Vernon, Anita, and worst of all, Naomi. She might never forgive him. Their love could crumble under the weight of betrayal she never saw coming. But keeping silent meant becoming part of the lie. Each day he stayed quiet, he edged closer to becoming the man he once despised, his father. The torment gnawed at him, minute by minute. Conversations with Naomi became strained. Her eyes reflected growing suspicion as she sensed his emotional withdrawal. Jacob tried to hold the facade, but inside, he was breaking. He began journaling, as if confessing to pages what he couldn't yet say aloud, for fear he'd never be able to turn back once he did. And then came the family meeting, a routine discussion about the new Dupree Legacy Scholarship Fund. But Jacob suddenly noticed something chilling. The grant allocations matched exactly one of the shadow transactions Doug had flagged. No more doubt. He was living inside a web of power, expertly constructed, wrapped in a humanitarian shell designed to hide a far uglier truth: corrupt, rotten, and dangerous. Jacob left the meeting stunned. That night, he stood on the balcony where Naomi had once shared her dream of opening a school for underprivileged black children, a beautiful dream now tainted by blood money. He watched Naomi preparing dinner, smiling gently, unaware the world was falling apart, and Jacob knew he couldn't hide anymore. He had to choose: tell the truth and lose everything, including the love of his life, or stay silent and become the very thing he once vowed to fight. And in a fleeting moment, standing between the night and the warm kitchen light, Jacob understood, neither choice was painless. But at least one would let him remain himself. The only question now was, would Naomi understand? Or would she be the first to walk away when everything he'd kept hidden finally came to light?